Hi, I'm Audrey. I'm 30 years old, and today, I'm here to tell you a story, one I never thought I'd have to tell. But if you're anything like me, you've been through moments where you question everything you thought you knew about family. And trust me, no one would have guessed this story would unfold the way it did. So, here's how it started. The first time I realized something was off, I was 12. It was the first family reunion after my parents' divorce. I remember the way the warm summer air felt against my skin, but it was a false sense of peace. I walked into that house, holding Lily's hand, thinking, hoping, really that maybe this time it would be different. But as soon as Derek, my older brother, saw me, his face froze. He didn't even greet me. Really, Audrey, you're bringing her to my family reunion. He pointed at Lily, the 6-year-old I'd fought so hard to have, the daughter I'd poured every ounce of love into. Derek was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. I, on the other hand, was the screw-up, the troublemaker. I saw the way Mom and Dad smiled at Derek, like he could do no wrong, even when I knew the truth. But they'd never know that. No one knew that my brother, the one they'd praised for being perfect, had always been a manipulator. And that's when it happened. I heard Derek laugh under his breath. "Oh, Audrey, you're just pathetic. Your life, it's a joke. Just look at the mess you've created. It's honestly embarrassing." I froze, feeling a rush of heat rise up in my chest. I stood there for a second, looking at him, and I saw it, the same smug look on his face. It was like every painful moment I'd ever experienced with him was flashing through my mind. And in that moment, something inside of me broke. I realized this time, I wasn't going to sit back and take it anymore. But things didn't stop there. Oh no, that night, things went from bad to worse. Mom and Dad were too busy with Derek's success to even notice what was happening in front of their eyes. Derek always got the best of everything: attention, praise, admiration, while I got the leftovers. I got the judgment, the sneers, the whispers behind my back. But tonight, the real betrayal was about to begin. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, this isn't just about me. This is about standing up, finding your voice, and making sure those who have wronged you know it. So here's where it all takes a dark turn. Stay tuned, because things are about to get ugly. Setting the stage for betrayal. It had been a few years since I'd gotten the courage to go back to my parents' house. After the divorce, things with Derek got worse. At first, I was hopeful we could have some kind of normal family gatherings, but deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't just the little things, the jokes about me being the family screw-up, the whispers behind my back. It was the way my parents' eyes always lit up when they saw Derek, while my existence was often an afterthought. That night, at the reunion, everything changed. As I stood by the door, clutching Lily's hand, waiting for my parents to greet us, I couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider in my own family. But I pushed that aside. Lily needed her family. When we walked in, Derek was standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed, looking like a picture of success. He wore the kind of smile that always made people around him believe he had it all together. His wife, Natalie, stood by his side, radiant and composed, the perfect image of the life my parents always dreamed of for me. But, of course, they would never see me like that. Not Audrey. Not the girl who couldn't hold a job long enough or keep a marriage intact. I tried to ignore the rising tension in my chest, the sick feeling creeping up my throat. I smiled at my parents, who barely looked up from their conversation. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I said quietly, trying to hide the strain in my voice. I wasn't looking for anything special, just an acknowledgement that I existed. But it didn't come. "Hello, Audrey," Mom said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her glance flicked toward Lily, who was standing beside me, still waiting for the warm embrace she had always dreamed of from her grandparents. But Lily's moment was quickly overshadowed. "You're here," Dad said, his tone flat. "Where's Derek?" I didn't even need to look up to see Derek's smirk. The moment we walked in, I could tell he was already judging me. No words were necessary. His eyes said it all. His casual dismissal of me was like a slap in the face. "Nice to see you again, sis," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But I wasn't backing down this time. Not this time. The moment of decision. I didn't know it then, but that night standing there, holding my daughter's hand, being completely ignored by the people I was supposed to love, I would make a decision that would change everything. It wasn't just Derek's smirk or his sharp words that hit me. It was the quiet way my parents continued to feed into his lies, his manipulations, the way they gave him everything praise, validation while I stood there, a mere shadow of the daughter I had once been. And Lily, my sweet, innocent girl, was already starting to notice. After dinner, we were sitting in the living room when Derek leaned in and whispered something that made my blood run cold. "You really think you can raise her right? You, after everything you've done, she'll never measure up to my perfect family." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I already knew what I had to do. But what was coming next? You'll have to wait and see. It's not just about revenge anymore. It's about making sure they knew exactly who I was. And trust me, by the time I was done, Derek and the rest of my family would regret the day they ever underestimated me. My name is Audrey. I'm 30 years old, and my family has never been what you would call perfect. For most of my life, I lived in the shadow of my older brother, Derek. He had everything: looks, charm, success, and he knew it. And as for me, well, I was always just there. You see, my family had a way of making you feel invisible, unless you were doing something spectacular. And Derek, well, he was spectacular. Or at least, that's how Mom and Dad made him feel. I can't even remember a time when they didn't praise him, all the while ignoring the things that really mattered, like kindness, empathy, or just being a good person. But things weren't always this way. There was a time, long before I ever felt overlooked or abandoned, when we were a family that tried. The quiet undercurrent of family life. I remember growing up in a small house on the outskirts of town. We weren't poor, but we definitely weren't rich either. My dad worked long hours as an attorney, a corporate lawyer who built his career by being ruthless. But he always came home with this facade of happiness. My mom, well, she was the stay-at-home type, always in the kitchen, always trying to make the house look perfect. But that perfection was always so fragile. I was the youngest, the one who never seemed to do anything right in their eyes. Derek, on the other hand, had this effortless charm. He was tall, athletic, and had a way of making everyone laugh, especially Mom and Dad. I remember how they would always joke about how he was the one with the future, the one who could make them proud. And me, well, I was just Audrey, the girl who questioned things too much, the one who couldn't seem to fit in with their idea of what a perfect family should look like. But it wasn't just about what they said. It was what they didn't say. I could tell how they'd sigh when I spoke up about things, as if I were ruining the image they worked so hard to maintain. It wasn't just me who felt the pressure. My younger brother, Troy, was another piece in the puzzle that never quite fit. Troy was a wanderer, didn't finish college, never really found a career he loved. But no one ever criticized him. They just shrugged it off, as if he were finding his way. And maybe he was. But I never got that same leniency. The first taste of betrayal. I left home when I was 18, joined the military, and fought 2 tours in Afghanistan. In those dark, dusty trenches, I learned what it meant to be alone with my thoughts, to rely only on the people around me. I had no choice but to trust my brothers in arms. And when I came home, I thought I would finally be able to rebuild something. I used my VA loan to buy a house in a quiet little town in North Carolina. It was small, modest 3 bedrooms, a backyard garden, and a garage full of tools I would never use again. But it was mine, and I had this image in my mind. I would build a life here, raise a family, and forget the war that haunted me in my sleep. I'd finally get away from the chaos of my childhood, the harshness of my parents' expectations. But what I didn't expect was that my family, the same one I had run from, would come knocking at my door. The call that changed everything. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I got the call. The phone rang just as I was out back, pruning the zucchini in my garden. I had the smell of fresh soil in my nostrils and the birds singing overhead. A perfect scene of peace that I thought I had earned. But then I saw my mom's name on the screen. "Garrett, son," she said, her voice shaking as if she'd been crying. "Your father and I, we're in trouble. Our lease is up, and we don't have anywhere to go. Can you help us out for a little while?" I felt the weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. The old guilt that I'd carried all these years came flooding back. All the times I had left them behind when I joined the military. All the years I'd spent away, letting their lives crumble while I was fighting my own battles. I didn't even think about it. Of course, "Mom, there's plenty of room. Come on down." I never realized how that one decision would change everything. I thought I was being the good son, making up for the years I had lost. But what I didn't know was that this was going to be a war far worse than any I'd ever fought before. And it was going to be fought right in my own home. A family that never changed. They arrived a week later, my mom, my dad, and Troy, the one I had never been able to rely on, the one who'd never figured out his life. When they stepped out of the car, my mom's frail, worn face was the first thing I saw. She walked toward me slowly, her hand clutching an old fabric bag, as if carrying the weight of her entire life in that one bag. My father followed, his gait slow and heavy, wearing his faded baseball cap low over his face. And then there was Troy, looking just as lost as I remembered, earbuds stuck in his ears, barely even acknowledging my presence. "Garrett, son," Mom called to me, her voice softer than I remembered. She pulled me into a tight hug, and I smelled that familiar perfume she'd worn since I was a kid. It was comforting and painful at the same time. I forced a smile, trying to hide the tension building in my chest. "Good to see you, Mom, Dad, Troy. Come inside. I'll make some coffee." We all went inside, and the weight of their presence hit me immediately. I noticed how my dad, without saying a word, sank into the couch, removing his shoes and leaving dirty streaks on the rug. Troy made a beeline for the fridge and grabbed a soda without even asking. And Mom, she started scanning the house, eyeing every room as if appraising it, even while she made small talk. It should have been a normal visit, but it wasn't. Not with them. Not with the years of tension and unspoken resentment that were hanging over us like a storm cloud waiting to break. A quiet war begins. Over the next few days, things didn't get better. They just stayed the same. Mom took over the kitchen, cooking meals I didn't want, while Dad spent his time glued to the TV, watching car repair shows and hunting programs. He never lifted a finger to help. And Troy just existed. He didn't care about finding a job. He didn't care about anything. He spent his days on his phone or playing games online, while I was the one footing the bill for everything. The utilities, the groceries, the internet, everything. It was supposed to be temporary. They'd get back on their feet, find a new place. But as the days dragged on, I began to feel the weight of their presence more and more. It was like I was living in a house that wasn't mine anymore. They'd taken over. and I didn't know how to stop it. But then, one afternoon, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, it happened. Troy walked in with a backpack slung over his shoulder, a half smile on his face. "Hey, Garrett, I need a place to crash. Just for a couple weeks. I'm looking for a job." I stared at him, my stomach sinking. I was already stretched thin, but I didn't say no. But this was the moment when everything changed, when the floodgates opened. The question was, how far would I let them push me? And when was enough going to be enough? I'm Audrey, and I thought I knew what family was. I really did. Until they walked into my life, turned it upside down, and showed me exactly how little I mattered. Now, I'm not sure who I am anymore, but I'll tell you this, I wasn't going to sit back and let them destroy me. Not again. The pressure builds. It had been weeks since they moved in. Each day, the weight of their presence grew heavier, a constant pressure that left me feeling suffocated in my own home. It was supposed to be temporary, just a few weeks, and they'd find a place to live, but every day felt like a lie. My parents, they weren't even trying to find a new place. Dad watched TV for hours on end. Mom cooked the same greasy meals, never once asking if I wanted to help. She still clung to her old ways, trying to make me feel like I was the one who needed fixing. Troy, he was like a ghost in my house, wandering from room to room without ever actually living. His only contribution was to complain about how hard it was to find a job. Meanwhile, I was footing the bill for everything. The utilities, the food, the internet. I was drained physically and emotionally, but I couldn't say no. They were family, after all, and wasn't that what you did for family? But every night, as I lay in bed, I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, the way they'd always dismissed me, always treated me as less than. I wasn't just upset anymore. I was furious. The turning point. And then it happened. It wasn't anything huge at first. It was just a comment, a simple, offhand remark from Derek that made my heart stop. We were sitting at the dinner table, the four of us. The familiar hum of the television buzzed in the background. While I tried to ignore the rising tension in the room, Mom and Dad were deep in conversation about something that barely concerned me. Troy, of course, was on his phone, oblivious to everything around him. And then Derek, with his usual smug grin, leaned back in his chair and looked at me like he was the judge and I was the defendant. "So, Audrey," he said casually, "how's it feel being the one who has to take care of everything Mom and Dad are too old for this stuff, right? And Troy, well, you know how he is." The words hit me like a slap. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it. Like I was nothing. Like it was my duty to pick up the pieces of the life they'd destroyed, to play the role of the perfect daughter, the perfect caregiver. But the worst part, I let him degrade me like that, over and over again, because I thought maybe, just maybe, I could make them see me, see the person I had become. I had always been the one to apologize, to sacrifice, to bend and break to fit their expectations. But not anymore. I felt the rage build inside me, a cold fury I hadn't realized was lurking beneath the surface. The anger that had simmered for years, that had been buried so deep, I thought it would never see the light of day. The first step. The next morning, I didn't make breakfast. I didn't clean the kitchen. I didn't even answer the phone when Mom called. I sat there in silence, letting the weight of my decisions settle over me. I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. I wasn't going to play their game. I decided it was time to make them see, to show them the truth about how they had treated me and how they had treated each other. It wasn't just about Derek's words. It was about the years of silent disrespect, the way they'd always turned a blind eye to my pain. I started with the one thing I knew they couldn't ignore: the truth. I began to gather evidence texts, emails, and recordings from all the times they'd undermined me, belittled me, and treated me like I didn't matter. I still had the voicemail from when Dad had told me I'd never amount to anything, that I was too weak to make it on my own. I had the email where Mom told me I'd never be able to handle being a mother, just like I couldn't handle anything else in life. And Derek had no idea what I had. Every time he'd made a joke at my expense, I'd recorded it. Every time he'd mocked me, I'd been there, listening in silence, knowing that one day, I would have the power to make them all see me for who I truly was. The quiet one, the one they thought would always be silent. Well, Audrey was done being silent. Twist. The moment of clarity. I remember the day it hit me, the moment I realized I couldn't back down anymore. It was another one of those family dinners. This time, it was just me, Derek, and Troy. Mom and Dad were out for the evening, leaving the three of us alone. The tension was thick in the air, the kind of silence that only happens when you know something is coming. And then it happened. Derek said something so casually, so arrogantly, I could feel my stomach churn. You know, Audrey, you've always been good at playing the victim. But that's all you do, isn't it? Whine and complain about how hard your life is? Maybe if you stopped focusing on your little problems, you'd actually get somewhere in life. I stopped breathing. I could feel the blood rush to my face. For a split second, I thought I might snap, but I didn't. Instead, I just smiled a cold, calm smile, the kind of smile you give when you know something they don't. Is that so? I asked quietly. Well, Derek, maybe it's time you find out just how much I've been holding back. The moment of reckoning. I didn't do anything that night. I didn't yell or scream. I didn't storm off. I just let Derek's words settle in my mind. I knew what I had to do. The moment I'd been planning for so long was finally here. The next day, I started working on my plan. I wouldn't just confront them, I would expose them. All of them. Derek, Mom, Dad, Troy, everyone. I would show them how I had been treated all these years. And I wouldn't stop until they realized just how far they had pushed me. But as I began to make my moves, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about something much bigger. It was about taking back control of my life. It was about finding my own voice, the one I had silenced for so long. And I would do it with precision. Every move would be calculated. Every step would be deliberate. But things weren't going to be as easy as I thought. When I began to pull the threads of the family apart, I started to see cracks in the foundation of everything I thought I knew. Someone was watching me, someone who would stop at nothing to make sure I didn't succeed. And now, the question was, who was it I had finally reached a breaking point? I thought I'd been preparing for this moment for months, but now that it was here, it felt different, more real, more dangerous. I had everything I needed, the recordings, the screenshots, the text messages. Every piece of evidence was carefully documented, waiting for the right moment. The plan was simple. I was going to expose them. But as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the pile of evidence in front of me, I realized something that made my stomach twist. They won't go down without a fight. I had always thought I knew my family, what they valued, what they were capable of. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized how little I understood them, and the more dangerous they became. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my daughter, Lily, for her future. I couldn't let them teach her that family meant silence and submission. The calm before the storm. The morning after I made the decision to take action was quiet, too quiet. It was like the calm before a storm, and I could feel it in the air, thick with anticipation. I made myself a cup of coffee, the warm steam rising from the mug, but I didn't drink it. I just held it, staring at the dark liquid swirling inside. my mind running through the steps of the plan I had set in motion. The first part was easy. I needed to make them believe everything was normal. I had to lull them into a false sense of security. They couldn't know what was coming. Not yet. I looked out the window at my parents' car parked in the driveway. Mom had already left for the grocery store, and Dad was still in his usual spot, plopped down in front of the TV, watching sports. Troy, well, he had disappeared again, probably off with his friends, doing who knows what. It didn't matter. I was alone for now, and that's all I needed. The house was silent, almost suffocatingly so. I couldn't tell if it was the weight of the plan or the weight of the years of frustration finally pushing through. But the silence was deafening. Gathering the evidence. The plan had to be precise. The smallest slip-up could ruin everything. I had everything I needed. But the hardest part was knowing how to deliver it, how to make them feel what I had felt all these years. I had saved every single thing that had been said to me, every piece of evidence that would prove they'd been manipulating me for years. Texts from my mother, telling me I'd never be enough. Emails from Dad, asking for money, then blaming me when things went wrong. And Derek. His words were the hardest to swallow, especially after everything I had learned, the messages he'd sent, the way he'd convinced Mom and Dad that I was a failure while elevating himself to a level I could never reach. But it wasn't just about the physical evidence. It was about showing them who they had turned me into. It was about taking back control. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the texts Derek had sent me, the ones where he mocked me for not being good enough. I had saved all of them, not just because I knew one day I would need them, but because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't the problem. That they were. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I wasn't just exposing them, I was exposing myself too. My weaknesses, my failures, the things I'd tried to hide for so long, but it was necessary. I had to break free, and the only way to do that was by shattering everything they thought they knew about me. The phone call. I picked up the phone and dialed. The call went straight to voicemail. It was just what I needed. I had prepared for this moment for days, and I wasn't about to let a simple delay stop me. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, "I need to talk to you about something important. It's about Derek, and it's time for you to know the truth." The words came out easier than I had expected. I wasn't shaking, wasn't unsure. I had spent too long doubting myself. Now, I was certain. "You won't believe what he's been doing behind your back. You'll be shocked. But it's time for you to know what he's really like." I ended the call, leaving the message to hang in the air. I knew she would call me back eventually, but it didn't matter. I had made my move. The preparation. Now came the hard part. While I waited for her to call back, I started preparing the documents, the proof that would bring them down. I laid everything out on the table: screenshots, bank statements, emails. There was one document, though, that made my hands shake. The recording of Derek's voice. The one where he'd said those hurtful things to me, things I couldn't even bring myself to repeat. That was the one, the key to it all. I looked at the recording one last time, feeling the weight of the truth pressing against my chest. I knew that once I played it, there would be no going back. But I couldn't turn back now. This was the only way. I opened my laptop, prepared to send the message that would change everything. I could feel the familiar mix of dread and excitement bubbling up in me. The unexpected visitor. Just as I hit send on the email containing the first piece of evidence, I heard a knock on the door. It was a sharp, loud knock, one I wasn't expecting. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't ready for this. But there it was again. Another knock. I glanced at my phone, still waiting for the call from Mom. I couldn't answer the door. Not now. Not while I was in the middle of all this. But the knocking didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent. I had no choice. I stood up and walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I opened it slowly, and standing there on the other side was Derek. His smile was gone, replaced by something I couldn't quite place. Was it fear, guilt? I couldn't tell. "I think we need to talk," he said, his voice low and tense, and just like that, I realized Derek already knew. He knew everything. And now, everything I'd worked for was at risk. Was he here to stop me, or was this the beginning of the real fight? Everything had been leading to this moment, the moment I would finally show them who I was. The moment I would no longer be the quiet, overlooked daughter, no longer the failure in their eyes. I was done playing their game. This time, it was my turn to play by my own rules. I had all the pieces in place. My phone, full of incriminating texts and recordings. My email, ready to send with all the proof I needed. And Derek, well, Derek thought he was the puppet master. But I had one thing he didn't control. The showdown begins. The moment Derek walked into my house, I knew it wouldn't be easy. I should have expected this. Of course, he was here to stop me. Of course, he was going to try to twist things, play the victim. That's what he always did. He wasn't just my brother. He was my tormentor, the one who had always made me feel small, unworthy. And now, I was the one holding all the cards. But as I stood there in the doorway, watching him stand in front of me, that old familiar tension gnawed at me. My pulse quickened, but I held my ground. I wasn't scared anymore. "Are you here to stop me, Derek?" I asked, my voice calm but carrying the weight of everything I had been holding back for years. He stood tall, with that smug grin on his face, the same one I had seen for years. It was the look of someone who thought they had it all figured out, someone who thought they had control. But I could see the flicker of doubt behind his eyes. He wasn't so sure anymore. "No," Derek replied, his voice dripping with feigned innocence. "I'm here because I thought we could talk. You know, about all the crazy stuff you've been doing, all this evidence you've been collecting. You really think it's going to help you, Audrey?" His words hit me like a slap. He was trying to downplay everything, trying to twist it, make it seem like I was the one in the wrong. But that's not what I was seeing anymore. I was done being manipulated. "You really don't get it, do you?" I said, stepping back into the room and shutting the door behind me. "This isn't about what you think. This is about me finally taking control of my life. And about time you learned that you don't have the power to control me anymore." I took a deep breath, trying to steady the pounding of my heart. The storm inside of me was ready to break loose, and there was no going back now. The battle of words. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. Derek stared at me, his eyes narrowing, searching for any sign of weakness. But I didn't flinch. I couldn't, not after everything. "Do you even hear yourself?" Derek scoffed, stepping closer. "You're pathetic. All this for what? To make me look bad, to tear this family apart." I felt my anger rising, the years of resentment bubbling up. Tear this family apart. He was the one who had already done that. He was the one who had torn us apart with every insult, every lie, every condescending remark. I didn't let him get any closer. You don't get to decide that anymore. You don't get to tell me what's right or wrong. You're the one who manipulated everyone in this family. Derek, you're the one who made me feel like I was never good enough. But not anymore. I pulled out my phone and held it in front of him. "These are all the texts you sent me, telling me I'd never amount to anything, that I was just a screw-up. Here, read it for yourself." I shoved the phone in his face, but Derek didn't take it. His lips tightened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't the smugness he usually wore. It was fear. but he quickly recovered. This is all bullshit. Audrey, you think these messages are going to change anything? You really think Mom and Dad are going to believe you over me? His words were sharp, like daggers, but I was prepared for them. I don't need them to believe me. Derek, I said quietly, I just need them to hear the truth. I hit send on the email I had drafted earlier, an email that contained everything. The proof, the recordings, the truth about what Derek had been doing behind their backs. I watched as his face drained of color, and his jaw tightened. You actually did it, he whispered, his voice hoarse. You're really going to destroy this family. I smiled, not out of satisfaction, but out of relief. The truth was out. I had no more secrets, and I wasn't backing down. The first response, I could hear the ringing of my phone. I glanced at the screen, Mom. My stomach tightened. I knew what this call was going to be about, and I knew that this was the moment everything would change. I hesitated for a second before answering. Hello? Audrey, Mom said, her voice shaking. What is this? What are you doing? Why are you trying to tear this family apart? Her words hit me, but I held strong. I'm not tearing anything apart. Mom, I'm just showing you what's been happening. You've been blind to it for years, and I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a second, I thought she might hang up. But then I heard her voice, quieter this time, more vulnerable. I could hear the desperation in her voice. I had expected it, but it didn't make it any easier. I felt the tears welling up, but I fought them back. I wasn't going to let her guilt me again. I don't want you to turn on Derek, Mom. I just want you to see him for what he really is. I'm doing this for all of us, for the family we've lost. She didn't respond right away, and in that silence, I knew she was beginning to understand. Maybe she wasn't ready to admit it, but she couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Twist, the unseen enemy. Just as I thought I was making headway, I felt the tension shift again. It wasn't just Derek standing in front of me. There was something more. I had prepared for Derek's anger, for his words, but I hadn't prepared for what was about to come. The doorbell rang. I froze. It wasn't a knock. It was a doorbell, and it was the kind of ring that sent a chill down my spine. It was deliberate, crisp, and unsettling. I turned to Derek, my heart racing. Who? Before I could finish the question, Derek's eyes widened. Don't answer it, trust me. Just don't. But it was too late. I walked to the door, unsure of what I would find, and opened it. There, standing in front of me, was someone I never expected to see. Cliffhanger. Who was standing at my door? What had Derek been hiding? Was this the beginning of everything falling apart? Or was I about to face a new, even greater threat? I was still standing in the doorway, heart hammering in my chest, staring at the unexpected figure in front of me. The last thing I expected was to see my estranged cousin, Emily. Her eyes were wide with shock, as if she had just walked into something she hadn't bargained for. Behind her stood her fiancé, a tall, broad-shouldered man, looking just as surprised. What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily's gaze shifted to Derek, who stood frozen behind me, his face pale. His typical arrogance had vanished, and for the first time, I saw something close to fear in his eyes. We weren't expecting this," Emily stammered, her hand gripping her fiancé's arm. She looked at Derek, then at me, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. I had no idea what was going on. I heard some things, and when I saw your email, Audrey, I thought I should come see for myself. I stood there, trying to process the situation, my mind reeling. Emily had always been more distant, part of the family but not quite involved. She knew just enough about Derek to understand that something wasn't right, but I never imagined she'd be the one to show up at my door like this. "You saw the email?" I asked, my voice trembling. The pieces were finally clicking together, but I wasn't sure what to make of it yet. Emily wasn't supposed to be involved in this. She wasn't supposed to see the truth I'd laid bare. "Yeah, I saw it," she said quietly, stepping inside when I didn't move. I didn't know how bad things had gotten. "Derek, why didn't you tell me? I didn't know you were treating Audrey like this." Derek didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, staring at Emily. Then his expression hardened, and he finally spoke, his voice dripping with irritation. "Don't listen to her, Emily. She's just making things up. You know how she is. Always exaggerating, always playing the victim." I could feel my hands clench into fists at my sides. The anger, the frustration I had held back for years was threatening to spill over. Derek still had the nerve to lie, to twist the story into something that wasn't true. But Emily wasn't having it. She stepped toward him, her voice sharp. "Derek, stop! I've seen the proof. You think I'm blind? You've been lying to everyone, and now you're trying to cover it up. Well, not anymore." I could see Derek's face flush with rage, but he didn't respond. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself. The silence between us stretched, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The unraveling. Emily's words were like a pin dropping in a quiet room. Derek had no more excuses. He had no more power over me. For years, I had felt like I was living in his shadow, always trying to prove myself worthy in the eyes of my family. But now, in this moment, I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I was done seeking it. "What's happening?" Emily's voice broke through the silence. "Why didn't you ever tell me what you were doing to Audrey? Why did you let things get so bad?" Derek finally turned to face her, his expression cold. But for a moment, I saw the cracks. There was something in his eyes, shame, maybe, or regret. But he quickly masked it, the familiar smugness creeping back into his posture. "You don't understand," he said, his tone sharp. "This is all her fault. She's always been difficult, always had to make things about her. And now she's dragging me down with her." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. The words were familiar, the same ones he had used for years to manipulate people into believing he was the victim. But Emily wasn't buying it anymore. "No, Derek," she said firmly. "You've been manipulating everyone, including me. I've been so blind to it, but now I see it. You've been lying, taking everything, while Audrey, she's the one who's been carrying the weight of this family, and I don't want any part of that." The shock on Derek's face was unmistakable. His expression shifted from anger to disbelief, but then it quickly morphed into something darker, something more dangerous. "You really think you can just come here and turn everyone against me?" Derek's voice was low, almost a growl. "You have no idea what you're doing. This family has always been mine to control, and you all just let me. You let me do it, and now you want to throw it all away." I stepped forward, my body trembling with the weight of everything I had fought for. The years of feeling worthless, the nights spent lying awake, wondering if I'd ever be enough. It was all coming to a head now, but I wasn't scared anymore. "You've been controlling this family, Derek, but not anymore," I said, my voice steady. "We're done with that. I'm done with that." The moment of truth. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and understanding. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know how deep it went. I thought maybe I could help. But now I see. This has been going on for too long." I nodded, my throat tight. "It's not just me. It's been everyone. Derek's been tearing us apart from the inside, and I couldn't stay silent anymore." For a moment, there was silence between us. Emily stood there, her hands wringing nervously, glancing between Derek and me. But then, her gaze hardened. "I'm done protecting you, Derek." The finality in her words hit like a hammer. Derek's face turned red with rage as he opened his mouth to speak. But before he could say anything, Emily held up her hand. "No, you don't get to talk anymore," she said. "Not after everything you've done." And with that, the illusion of family was shattered. The walls that Derek had so carefully built around him were crumbling. And for the first time, I felt free. Not just of him, but of everything I had been carrying all these years. But just as I thought the worst was over, I heard the sound of a car engine pulling into the driveway. I froze. The car door slammed shut, and my heart skipped a beat. My breath caught in my throat as I turned to look out the window. The driveway was quiet. Too quiet. I had already faced Derek, Emily, and all the lies. But now, someone else was about to walk into this mess, and I didn't know what to expect anymore. Could it get worse? Or was this the moment I had been waiting for? I stood frozen for a few seconds, my mind racing. I had already sent the email with the evidence, had already watched the people I had once trusted crumble before me. Was this the final confrontation, or was there more to the story? The footsteps outside the door grew closer, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. But I wasn't going to let fear take over now. The last reveal. The doorbell rang again, sharper this time, and then, without giving me a chance to prepare, the door opened. I didn't even have time to speak. I just stood there, staring at the figure standing in front of me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Standing in the doorway was my mother. She looked different, tired, pale, but also resolved. The usual mask of indifference was gone. She looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years: guilt. "Audrey," she whispered, her voice unsteady, "I know what's been going on. I know what Derek has done to you, to all of us, and I'm so sorry." I couldn't move. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling. This was the moment I had been waiting for, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. Was this an apology? Or was it just another part of her manipulation? Was she finally seeing the truth? Or was she just saying the words I needed to hear? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. But then my mother stepped inside, closing the door behind her softly. Her gaze fell on the kitchen table, on the evidence I had laid out, and then back to me. "I never wanted you to feel this way," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "But I've been blind for so long." I swallowed hard. "Blind Mom, you knew. You always knew. You just chose not to see it. Derek, he's been tearing this family apart. And you let him. You let him hurt me over and over again. And you didn't say a word." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked down. I didn't know how to stop him. He always had control. And I was scared to lose him. Her words hit me like a blow. Fear. That's what had kept her silent all these years. The fear of losing her son. The same son who had torn me apart, piece by piece, but never faced any consequences for his actions. "Scared?" I asked, my voice trembling with frustration. "What about me? What about the daughter you were supposed to protect?" The tears began to fall from her eyes, but I didn't feel sympathy. I couldn't. The hurt was still too fresh. "I've failed you, Audrey. I've failed you so many times, and I can't take it back, but I can try. I can help you now." I looked at her, struggling to reconcile the woman I had once loved with the one standing before me. Could I trust her now? Or was this just another round of her trying to fix what was never truly broken? The moment of truth. But then, as the silence hung heavy in the room, I realized something. I didn't need her apology anymore. I didn't need their approval. I had fought this battle on my own, and I had won. Not for them, not for Derek, but for me. I had spent years trying to prove my worth, years believing that if I just tried hard enough, I could earn their love, their respect. But now I realized it wasn't about earning anything from them. It was about reclaiming my life. It was about standing up for myself, even if that meant standing alone. "Mom," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It's too late for apologies. I'm done being your backup. Done playing the role of the broken daughter. I'm not that person anymore." Her face crumbled as I spoke. "I know. I understand. But can we at least try? Can we work through this together? I want to be here for you. I don't know where to start." I shook my head. "I don't know either, Mom, but what I do know is that I'm not going back to the way things were. I'm moving forward, with or without you." For a moment, she stood there, looking at me like she was trying to find the daughter she had lost. But in that look, I saw something shift. A realization, maybe. A recognition that the world had changed, that things couldn't stay the same anymore. The unexpected twist. Just as I thought the conversation was over, just as I thought I had regained some control over the situation, I heard a noise. A quiet, almost imperceptible sound coming from the hallway. I turned to see Derek standing there, his eyes filled with disbelief. The last of his bravado was gone, replaced by something else, fear. "You've done it now, Audrey," he said in a low voice, his hands clenched at his sides. "You've ruined everything. You think you're going to get away with this. You're making a huge mistake." I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. Derek had pushed me too far, and now he was trying to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. But it was too late. He had already lost. "I don't have to listen to you anymore," I said, my voice steady. "You're not in control anymore." But Derek wasn't done. He stepped forward, his face twisted in rage. "You think she can fix everything? You think she can save you from what's coming? You're wrong. You've made an enemy out of the wrong person, Audrey. And now, you're going to pay." His words echoed in my mind. Even as he turned and stormed out of the room, the door slammed behind him. And in the silence that followed, I felt the tension break. But what had he meant? What was he planning? Was Derek truly done trying to control me? Or was this just the calm before the storm? And what would happen next? What would I do now that I had finally taken control of my life? Stay tuned. The final showdown is just around the corner. You won't want to miss what happens next. Story 2. I never thought I'd be standing here, in front of you, sharing this story. But today I have to. And trust me, it's not easy. My name is Audrey Thompson, and at 30 years old, I've learned that family isn't always what it seems. But the worst part, I used to think it was. Let me paint the picture for you. It was just another family dinner, one of those gatherings that should feel warm and comforting. Instead, it felt like a battlefield. The only difference was, I wasn't the one fighting back. Not yet, at least. But the moment I finally did, everything changed. It wasn't until I watched my brother slap my 6-year-old daughter, Lily, across the face at our family reunion that the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze. My blood ran cold. How could anyone, let alone family, do that? But here's the thing. It wasn't just my brother's rage that broke me. It was the fact that no one cared. Not my father, not my mother, no one. They all just watched, as if it was normal, as if Lily deserved it, my sweet, innocent girl. No one stood up. No one spoke out. And that's when it hit me. The family I once looked to for support was the very thing suffocating me. They thought I'd just sit back. They thought I was weak. They thought I didn't have the guts to stand up and fight back. But I will. I did. And today, I'm here to tell you how I took everything from them. My revenge wasn't just sweet. It was the ultimate justice. But before we dive in, if you've ever dealt with betrayal, with family who's made you feel small, then you're in the right place. Hit that like button, comment below, and don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, this is just the beginning. So, let's start. Let me take you back to that moment when I realized it was time to stop being the victim, when the truth about my family was finally clear. Growing up in the Thompson household, you learned pretty quickly that love didn't mean affection. It meant success. My father, Howard Thompson, was a corporate attorney, a successful one. And when you're a successful lawyer, everything around you is supposed to reflect that success. The house, the cars, the kids. But for me, no one ever seemed to care about what I wanted. It wasn't just the fact that I was the other child, the one who didn't measure up to my brother Derek. It was how everything about me was wrong. My father never let me forget it, Derek. Well, Derek was golden. I remember how Dad would talk about him like he was perfect, every chance he got, always comparing him to me. "Why can't you be more like Derek?" he'd say. "He's so much better at managing people." I'd just nod, smile, and bury the anger that would bubble up. I didn't want to disappoint him. But let's be honest, I was never going to be enough. Derek was the son Dad always wanted. I was just there. But I wasn't a part of his plan. He didn't need me to succeed. He needed Derek. And Mom, well, she just stood by. My mother, Eleanor, had this way of deflecting, making excuses. She always said, "Howard's just working hard for the family." But she never noticed that the harder he worked, the further apart we drifted. At least that's how it seemed to me. But despite all the tension, despite the distance, I tried. I really tried. And then there was Lily. When I had her, I thought maybe I could finally show my parents what love really looked like. Maybe I could show them that being a good parent didn't mean demanding perfection, that it meant understanding, nurturing, and loving your child unconditionally. But that illusion crumbled the moment I saw Derek slap my little girl. At that moment, something inside me snapped, and I realized, if I didn't fight back now, I'd never get the chance to. I couldn't let my daughter grow up in the same toxic environment that I did. So I did what I had to do. I started planning. I knew what I had to do to take them down, to make them see me. I wouldn't just sit back and let them tear my daughter and me apart. It started with the smallest thing, gathering information. I'd been recording family gatherings for months without them knowing. Every comment Derek made about how much better he was than me, every dismissive look my mother gave me when I tried to talk about my life, it was all on tape. And once I had the evidence, I was going to use it. They needed to see just how much damage they had caused. They needed to feel the weight of their actions. But I also knew something else. It wasn't just about winning. It was about justice. Justice for me, for Lily, and for every single time they made me feel like I wasn't enough. And that's where my story begins. The moment when I decided to stop being a victim and make them pay for everything they'd done. But I knew there was a bigger fight ahead. The question is, would they ever see it coming? It's easy to paint a pretty picture when you have all the right tools. And by all appearances, my family was the perfect one. At least, that's what everyone thought. The big house, the vacations, the fine dining, it all screamed success. But behind those closed doors, it was a different story. I remember the first time I realized that I was never going to be enough for them. It was the winter of my senior year in high school. My brother Derek had just been offered a spot at an Ivy League school, and my parents couldn't stop talking about it. I should have been happy for him. He was their golden child. But the truth was, it hurt. It hurt because I knew that no matter what I did, I'd never get the same praise. I was never going to be Derek. Derek, I'm so proud of you, Dad said, his voice full of pride as he raised his glass. This is just the beginning for you, son. You've got the world at your feet. My stomach tightened. It wasn't that I didn't love Derek. I did. But every word from my father felt like a slap in the face. Why wasn't anyone proud of me? Why didn't anyone care about the things I had accomplished? It was in that moment, when Derek was getting all the attention, that I knew I would always be the second choice. I'd never live up to their expectations. Not because I didn't try, but because I wasn't Derek. Cut to Audrey in her room, looking at old family photos, her fingers tracing the faces in the pictures. In the photos, everything looked perfect. Smiles, laughter, the occasional picture-perfect vacation. It all looked so idyllic. But I saw what the pictures didn't capture. I saw how my father would ignore me at family gatherings, how my mother would pretend everything was fine while quietly giving me those condescending looks. It was like I was invisible unless I messed up. And trust me, I messed up. It's easy to mess up when everyone expects you to be a version of someone else. My brother, Derek, was a success story in every way. He did everything my parents asked. He never asked questions. He never pushed back. That made him the perfect child. Meanwhile, I was difficult, too vocal, too opinionated, too different. Look at this. Audrey, my mom would say, her voice sweet but thin, with thinly veiled disappointment. Derek's been offered another internship. He's really going places. Yeah, that's great, I'd say, trying to hold it together. But the truth was I was suffocating. I wasn't allowed to exist unless I fit into their perfect mold. And I didn't. I wasn't that person. You see, this wasn't just a fight over success. It was a fight over recognition. Every time I pushed back, every time I tried to show them who I was, they pushed me down. And after a while, I started to believe their version of me, the one that said I wasn't good enough. But there was one person who did see me for who I was. My grandmother, Helen. She'd tell me stories about when she was young, how she used to run the community library and teach kids to read. I loved those stories. She was a reminder that not everything in life had to be about success and accolades. She understood me, and that was more than I could say for anyone else in my family. Grandma Helen was old-fashioned, sure, but she had a wisdom to her that my parents didn't have. She never judged me. She never compared me to Derek. She never made me feel like I was lacking. But even Grandma couldn't save me from the storm brewing within my own family. Grandma would sit at the head of the table, her hands shaking slightly as she poured the tea, listening to everyone talk about business deals, Derek's latest achievements, and my mother's complaints about the house. Everyone ignored her, as usual. I could see it in her eyes. She was there, but no one really saw her anymore. She was the quiet observer, the forgotten one. But I saw her. And then it happened. It was Thanksgiving dinner, a year before everything changed. Derek, my father, and my mother were talking about his new business venture again. He was always the center of attention, and it burned me up inside, though I kept my cool. But when I saw Grandma's hands tremble as she served the pie, I couldn't take it anymore. Enough, I said. The room fell silent. My father looked at me with that familiar, condescending smile. "What's wrong with you, Audrey? Can't you just be happy for Derek for once?" he asked, the disapproval thick in his voice. I looked at him, then at my mother, and then at Derek, who had that smug grin on his face. They had never once seen me. They had never once understood why I was angry. They'd never cared to. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just angry at them. I was angry at myself for allowing them to treat me this way, for letting myself believe that their opinions mattered more than mine. I had let them define me for too long. As I stood by that window, looking out at the fading light, I made a decision. I was done being invisible, done being the second choice, done with their expectations. I was going to take control. But how? How does one person take on a family so deeply ingrained in their own power and control? How do you get people to finally see you? The answer wasn't clear, but the plan was. I was going to expose them, show the world the truth about who they really were. But I knew I had to be careful. They were powerful. They were influential. And they'd never let me tear them down without a fight. But I had a secret weapon, one they didn't see coming. And that's when I realized it wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about making them regret ever thinking they could break me. But could I pull it off? Could I really take them down? The moment I decided to fight back wasn't a sudden burst of courage. It was the slow, painful realization that I had nothing left to lose. You see, I had been so used to playing the role of the invisible one, the overlooked daughter. The family always saw me as the troublemaker, the one who couldn't follow the script, the one who dared to challenge everything they stood for. But now I was done being quiet. It was time to turn the tables. But I had to be smart about it. It started with the tiniest of steps. At first, I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just gathering information. Small things. Little moments of my family's hypocrisy. It was almost comforting, in a way. Just me, alone, with my thoughts, my plans slowly taking shape. The more I observed, the more I realized how deeply I had been manipulated, how much they took advantage of me. "Did you hear about Sarah from accounting?" my father asked one evening, swirling his wine glass. "She was almost promoted to VP, but I hear she doesn't know how to close a deal. My God, it's embarrassing. I could do her job with my eyes closed." "Of course you could," my mother replied, smiling. "You've always been the one with the brains. Howard?" I didn't understand how they could be so blinded by their own success. How could they think they were above everyone else? Even people they worked with every day. But what really stung was how they treated me. Their own daughter. It was a pattern. When I was young, they praised me for things like my artwork, my ideas, anything that didn't challenge their comfort zone. But as I grew older, as I started questioning the world they'd built, I became a problem. And I was tired of being a problem they could easily dismiss. That's when I found the emails. My heart pounded in my chest as I skimmed through the thread between Derek and my father. Their plans, the money, the power, all of it right there. The way they talked about me, as if I didn't even exist, as if I were just some inconvenience in their perfect world. It was time. "Are you sure about this?" Tara asked me, her voice low. "I mean, your family. They have a lot of influence. What if they come for you? What if they destroy you before you even get a chance to fight back?" I sighed, looking out the window at the busy street. For the first time in years, I felt like I was about to do something that mattered. "They've already destroyed me," I said, my voice quiet but resolute. "I'm not scared of them anymore. It's my turn." Tara looked at me with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Just be careful. Audrey, this is bigger than you think." And she was right. It was bigger than I thought, but I couldn't stop now. This was it, the moment I'd been planning for, the moment I would start turning the tables. I had arranged a meeting with a private investigator, a man who didn't ask questions and knew how to find dirt. His name was Mark, and he had the kind of grizzled look that made you trust him, the kind of guy you could rely on when you needed something done in the shadows. "You sure you want to do this?" Mark asked, his eyes scanning my face. He had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. This won't be easy. You're messing with some powerful people. I don't care, I replied, my voice steady. I want everything. The emails, the phone records, the meetings. I need to know everything they've said about me, everything they've done to me. I'll pay whatever it takes. He nodded, a glint of understanding in his eyes. You got it. I had everything I needed. The next step was executing the plan. And that was where the real risk came in. I could feel the tension building inside me. It was like I was finally stepping into a role I had never played before, a role of power, of control. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. The first piece of the puzzle was almost too easy. I had a photograph of Derek with a woman he shouldn't have been seen with, a woman he was secretly having an affair with, while pretending to be the perfect family man in front of my parents. The hypocrisy of it all made me sick. I had seen enough to know that everything they had built was a house of cards, and I was about to knock it all down. But I wasn't going to stop there. I had been at that dinner, pretending to smile as Derek went on and on about his latest accomplishments. What they didn't know was that I had the perfect comeback, an email thread that would tear apart Derek's carefully constructed image. The lies he had fed everyone, all of it would be exposed. With one click, I sent the first piece of my plan to a trusted journalist. The email thread, the picture, the details. They would be published. It was only a matter of time before Derek's perfect world came crumbling down. I leaned back in my chair, watching the screen as the email sent. My heart raced. This was real. The plan had started. And I knew this was just the beginning. The plan was simple in theory, but the more I thought about it, the more it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing I had no choice but to jump. I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the screen. The evidence was out there now. The emails, the photos, the lies, everything I needed to expose my family for who they really were. It wasn't just about getting back at them. No, it was about taking control of my own life, once and for all. But that first email, the one I sent to the journalist, was just the beginning. The stakes were high. If I was going to pull this off, I needed to be strategic, meticulous. I couldn't afford to slip up. I couldn't risk everything for a moment of revenge. It had to be perfect. Okay, I muttered to myself, taking a deep breath. I've done the hard part. Now comes the next phase. But there was one problem. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. I thought I knew my family. I thought I understood their power, their reach. But what if I was wrong? I remembered every detail of those dinners. Derek always getting the praise, always with Dad's hand on his shoulder, always the perfect golden child. Meanwhile, I was the one who had to fight for a seat at the table, figuratively and literally. It wasn't just about the money, the success. It was about control. And they had all of it. It wasn't just about Derek and my parents anymore. This was about exposing everything, about showing them that I wasn't just the girl they overlooked. I was more than just the problem child. I was someone they could no longer ignore. I'm going to bring them down. All of them. I leaned forward, opening a new document. The journalist had been a step in the right direction, but I needed more. I needed the kind of proof that would make it impossible for my family to bury the truth. So, I went deeper. The next step would be risky. But this time, I wasn't going to just sit back and let it happen. I was going to take action. Mark didn't ask questions. And that's why I trusted him. He was the kind of guy who got results, no matter what. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, his voice low, looking over his shoulder as if someone might be watching. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I said, "I need everything. Their communications, their meetings. I need to know what they're really doing behind closed doors. And I need it now. Mark leaned in, his eyes narrowing. You're playing a dangerous game. Audrey, if you're not careful, this could blow up in your face. Are you ready for that? I don't care anymore. They've already taken everything from me. It's my turn. The next few days were a blur of messages, meetings, and tension. Every step felt like walking a tightrope, and one wrong move could send everything crashing down. I wasn't just gathering evidence now. I was assembling an arsenal. The first step had been simple. I had collected the photos, the emails, the texts. But that wasn't enough. I needed to show the world how far they would go to maintain their perfect image, how far they'd go to destroy anyone who didn't fit into their narrative. I started pulling together everything I could find: Derek's shady business dealings, my parents' financial manipulations, the lies they'd fed to their friends, the world. They were all in on it. Derek, my parents, even my mother's sister, Aunt Linda, who had always played the role of the loyal supporter. But I knew the truth now. All the little things that didn't add up, all the whispers behind closed doors. They weren't just a family, they were a well-oiled machine, designed to protect themselves and tear down anyone who threatened that. And I was about to make them pay. You know this isn't just about your family anymore, right? Tara asked, her voice quieter now, as if she were trying to make sure no one was listening. Once this stuff gets out, it's going to affect more than just you.
I don't care, I said, my voice firm. This isn't just for me. This is for all the years they made me feel like I wasn't worth anything, for all the times they crushed me under their expectations. It's about time they saw who I really am.
Tara nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She knew what I was risking. I wasn't just going after my family. I was going after everything they had built, everything they stood for. But I had come too far to turn back now. The plan was already in motion, and there was no way I was going to stop until I saw them crumble. I had it all, the evidence, the plan, the backup. It was time to hit send. But as I hovered my cursor over the send button, something stopped me. What if this didn't go as planned? What if they turned the tables on me? It wasn't until I hit send that I realized how far I'd gone. The email was out. The evidence was in the hands of someone who could destroy my family's perfect image in one fell swoop. I wasn't just angry anymore. This was personal, and it was going to hurt. A lot. For a moment, I stood there, watching my screen like it held the answers to every question I had ever asked. Could I really go through with this? What if it backfired? What if they came after me? My heart raced in my chest, and I felt my stomach tighten in the way only fear can make it. But I'd already come this far. I wasn't backing down now. Derek had it all, didn't he? The career, the recognition, the family's approval. My parents loved him. It was as if he could do no wrong. But the truth was that he was just as flawed as the rest of them. Maybe more. And now, I had the proof. Each file I opened felt like a piece of a puzzle slowly falling into place. It was all there, the text messages, the secret meetings, the shady business deals. Derek had been playing everyone, including my parents. I had a plan, but it was one thing to gather information and another to use it in a way that would bring them to their knees. I had one person who could help me now, Mark, the private investigator. He was the one who'd provided me with the initial proof. But now I needed something more. I needed him to help me cover my tracks. I need you to get me everything, I said, sitting down across from him. The legal papers, the emails, all of it. Mark raised an eyebrow, but didn't hesitate. You're sure you're ready for this? Once we dig, there's no going back. I nodded, my gaze hardening. I've been ready for this my whole life. There was a twist to this, though, something I hadn't expected. When Mark handed me the papers, I saw something I didn't expect. My father's name on a financial document, connected to the shady dealings. He wasn't just an innocent bystander in Derek's schemes. He was part of it. My father, the one I had spent years trying to please, was just as corrupt as the rest of them.
I felt a wave of nausea hit me. How could I have missed this? How could I have been so blind all these years of trying to fit into their perfect mold, only to discover they were no better than the people they judged? But that wasn't the worst of it. I started piecing together the connections, the money flowing through different accounts, the hidden assets, the emails exchanged behind my back. This wasn't just about my family's image. It was about money and power. It was clear now this wasn't just revenge. It was about justice. My family had built everything on a lie. They thought they could keep their secrets hidden forever. But they were wrong. "I've got more for you," I said, my voice calm but intense. "The story's bigger than we thought. My father's name is on those deals. You've got to run with this. You can't back down now. You're sure about this, Audrey? This is bigger than you think. If we expose them now, there's no telling how far they'll go to bury it." "I don't care," I replied. "They've buried me long enough. It's time they feel the weight of their own lies." The next 24 hours felt like a blur. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for the story to break. The pressure was mounting, and every second felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the storm to hit. And then, it happened. The headline flashed across my screen: "Family Empire Built on Lies. How One Daughter Exposed the Corruption Within." My stomach churned as I read it. This was real. This was happening. The world was about to know what my family had been hiding for years. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel. Anger, relief, satisfaction. But what I felt in that moment was something I hadn't expected at all: fear. Fear of what was coming next. Tara text message: "Audrey, I saw the headline. This is it, isn't it? You've done it." But then, another message. A private number. Unknown text message. "You think you've won. This is only the beginning. There's much more at stake than you realize." Who could it be? Who knew about this? And why did they feel the need to threaten me now? I could feel my pulse thudding in my ears as I stared at the text. The words on the screen felt like a weight that I couldn't shake off. "You think you've won. This is only the beginning. There's much more at stake than you realize." For a moment, I sat there, frozen. Who was this? Who knew about my plan? My heart raced, but I refused to let fear control me. I'd made it this far. There was no way I was backing down now. Cut to Audrey pacing in her apartment, looking out the window. The city lights flicker in the distance, but her thoughts are far away. I could feel the tension building, the realization settling in. This wasn't just about exposing my family anymore. This was about survival. Whoever had sent that message knew too much. They knew I was playing with fire, and they were warning me to back off. But I didn't want to back off. I couldn't. I had already crossed a line. I had to see this through, no matter the cost. Cut to Audrey's phone buzzing again. Another unknown number. I had to make a choice. I could ignore it, let it eat at me from the inside, or I could pick up the phone and face whatever was coming head on. I swiped the screen. Audrey voice shaking slightly. "Hello?" Unknown. On the other end, voice cool and clipped. "Don't pretend like you don't know who this is. Audrey, you've made a mess. And now, you're going to clean it up before we do it for you." I felt my breath catch in my throat. I recognized the voice, but it took a moment for the pieces to click together. Audrey voice trembling. "Who is this? What do you want from me?" Unknown. "You know exactly who I am. This little stunt you pulled with the journalist cute. But you've made a dangerous enemy.
You've crossed a line, Audrey. And now, you're going to pay the price for it. Cut to Audrey's face, pale, her fingers gripping the phone tightly as the realization hits her. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The voice on the other end wasn't just anyone. It was someone from my family, someone who had everything to lose if my plan succeeded. It was Derek. I had no idea how he knew what I'd done, but somehow he did. Cut to flashback scene Derek, smugly boasting at a family dinner about his accomplishments while Audrey sits silently, her fists clenched under the table. I remembered that night so clearly. The way Derek looked at me with such disdain. He'd always been the perfect son, the golden child. But now, with everything on the line, I finally understood. He wasn't just playing a role. He was actively trying to maintain control of everything, including me. Cut to Audrey standing still in her apartment, the phone still pressed to her ear. Audrey voice steadying, "I'm not backing down. You can't scare me into silence anymore." Derek on the phone, a low laugh escaping his lips. "You really think you can take us down? Audrey, you're nothing without us. I made you, and I can destroy you just as easily." Cut to Audrey's hand tightening around the phone as she fights back the tears. The weight of his words hits her harder than she expected. There it was, the truth, stripped bare. Derek, my own brother, thought he owned me. He always had. He wasn't just angry because I was fighting back. He was terrified that I might succeed, terrified that I might show the world who he really was. But this wasn't just about Derek anymore. It was about my whole family. They had manipulated me, controlled me, and used me for years. And I was done. Cut to Audrey sitting down at her desk, her face reflecting the severity of the situation. Her hands tremble as she reopens the file containing all the evidence she's gathered. I had already exposed part of them. The journalist had already published a few pieces, but I knew I needed more. This wasn't the time to sit back and hope it all worked out. This was war, and I had to be strategic. I couldn't just rely on what I'd already sent out. I needed more ammunition. Cut to Audrey on the phone with Mark, the private investigator. "Mark, I need everything. The full dossier. Everything they've been hiding," I said, my voice low but sharp. "They've come after me, and I need to make sure they never recover from this." Mark paused for a moment, and I could hear him shuffling papers in the background. "You sure you want to go this far?" he asked. "Once I give you everything, you're in this for good. No turning back." "I've already crossed that line," I replied, my voice cold. "Give me the information, Mark. Everything you've got." Cut to Mark pulling up a hidden folder on his computer. Audrey watches him through a video call, her face tense with anticipation. The pieces were starting to fall into place. What Mark was showing me wasn't just about Derek and my parents anymore. This was about corruption, about lies, about everything they had built on false pretenses. Cut to Audrey sitting alone at her desk, reading over the new documents Mark had sent her. The files weren't just about my father's business dealings anymore. There were transactions, accounts, and names, people I didn't recognize, but people my family had been hiding for years. The connections ran deep. My father had been laundering money through shell companies, and Derek had been involved in some shady business deals. It wasn't just a family empire built on lies. It was a criminal network. And I was about to take it all down. Cut to a flashback of Audrey walking into her father's office, standing there in front of his desk, looking at him with a new sense of understanding. All those years of trying to please him, to live up to his impossible standards, it had all been a lie. My father wasn't the man I thought he was. He wasn't the loving, hard-working man I'd grown up believing in. He was a liar, a cheat, a criminal. And now I had the proof. Cut to Audrey, staring at the files in front of her, a determined look in her eyes. But as I pieced everything together, the fear started creeping in again. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about taking down an entire empire. I could feel it in my gut. I was close. But the closer I got, the more dangerous it became. The deeper I dug, the more I realized there were people who would stop at nothing to protect the secrets I was about to expose. And they were coming for me. I sat there, my fingers trembling over my phone, staring at the message, the threat, the ultimatum. I had no idea who had sent it. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. Cut to Audrey sitting in her apartment, surrounded by the aftermath of everything she had done, stacks of papers, the phone buzzing constantly, her eyes darting nervously. I had spent weeks preparing, building up to this moment, and now, everything was unraveling. The information I had sent out, the secrets I had uncovered, it was all coming to a head. What had started as a mission for justice had spiraled into something far bigger, far more dangerous than I ever imagined. The phone call, the threats, they weren't just some empty warning. Someone, somewhere, was pulling strings. They knew everything. And now they were coming for me. Cut to a flashback of Audrey walking through the empty halls of her childhood home, now feeling like a stranger. I had grown up in this house. Every corner, every room was filled with memories, but not the kind you'd want to remember. I had been suffocated by the expectations of my family, held captive by their image of who I was supposed to be. For years, I had fought to break free, and now, here I was, facing the consequences of every choice I had made. But even though the fear gripped me, the adrenaline from everything I had done surged through my veins. I wasn't the same girl I used to be, the girl who had been overlooked, the girl who had been told she wasn't enough. Now, I was the one who held the power. Cut to Audrey at her desk, going through the final pieces of evidence, her mind racing. The story had broken, yes, but that was just the beginning. My family was scrambling, trying to control the damage. Derek had reached out to me with threats, promising retribution. But what did he really think he could do? The truth was out there, and once it was out, there was no way to hide it. But this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This wasn't about making them feel the pain I'd lived with for years. It was about exposing the truth, about taking down the illusion they had created and finally standing on my own 2 feet. Cut to Audrey, looking at herself in the mirror, eyes fierce, her reflection staring back at her. This wasn't just about breaking free from my family's grasp. It was about freedom, true freedom. The kind of freedom that didn't rely on their approval, their money, or their twisted version of reality. As I stood there, staring at the reflection of a woman I didn't recognize at first, I realized something. The hardest thing about this journey wasn't the threats, the fear, or even the betrayal. It was letting go of the person I thought I had to be, the daughter they always wanted, the obedient, silent one. I wasn't that girl anymore. Cut to Audrey walking into her office the next day, where she sits down at her desk, pulling up more documents. The phone buzzes, the message flashing, "Are you ready for what's coming next?" I couldn't avoid the inevitable. The pieces were already in motion. It was only a matter of time before everything exploded. The article had gone viral. The public was outraged by what they read. My family's carefully crafted facade had been shattered. But then, things took an unexpected turn. Cut to Audrey opening a new email, her eyes scanning the message. Her heart drops. It was a message from an unknown source, encrypted and coded in a way that only someone with insider knowledge could have done. It wasn't just a random threat. This was a warning. "Don't think this is over. We have everything you've done. Audrey, every move, every lie. You think you can take us down. You'll regret it." My stomach dropped. I had no idea who could be behind this. My family was in chaos. Derek was panicking, trying to do damage control. But this felt different. This felt like someone else was involved. Someone who had been watching me from the shadows. Cut to Audrey, pacing again, her hand running through her hair in frustration. Who else was involved? Who was pulling the strings behind the curtain? I had already exposed my family's secrets. But someone else knew too much. Someone who wasn't afraid to make their move. I had underestimated how far they were willing to go. The fear that had gripped me earlier in the day was growing. But so was my resolve. I couldn't back down now. Cut to flashbacks of every conversation, every warning I had received. All of it had been leading to this moment. The realization dawned on me. The threat wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting Lily. It was about ensuring that my daughter wouldn't grow up in the same toxic environment I had. This fight wasn't just mine to win. It was hers too. And I would not let them tear her future apart the way they had tried to tear me down. Cut to Audrey standing at the window, looking out into the city as the rain starts falling. Her expression is a mixture of determination and fear. I had no idea who was behind this new message, but I knew one thing for sure. They were desperate. They were scared. And that was exactly how I wanted them to feel. The storm was coming, but it wasn't one I could avoid. It was the storm I'd created, and now I had to face it head on.